I Am the Specialist of the Strange, written by Dakota Frandsen, narrated by Douglas MacArthur, published by Bonkers Network, LLC. Section 8. This Was War, January 2021. My attempt at a documentary, The Hunt for Olivia, was picked up by a new paranormal-based streaming service with added investigation footage. My attention was brought to this streaming platform by one of the former heads of the company that had me helping him edit some investigation clips for him. Working with this man led to some conflicts, and not knowing who to really trust in these matters, I stepped away and pursued my own interests. Was it a smart move to make? Probably not. Not much has been made from it, but it's still good to get out and experiment. February 14th to 15th, 2021, I was visiting a friend in Coeur d'Alene for Valentine's weekend. For Censored, I managed to get access to decent Wi-Fi so I could attend live streams we did to promote the company. We'd talk about company updates, research cases, various forms of phenomenon, etc. I was continuing my research for the Censored documentary. Censored was internationally based and gathered reports from all over the globe. Apparently, a censored case had emerged, prompting a company-wide allocation of resources to uncover the truth. While on the live stream, it seemed that somebody wasn't happy. Shadows racing around people, mysterious voices, growls, all started to scare the audience, but it was far from the worst of it. Knowing I had experience against this thing, the CEO asked me to speak about my prevailing theory on the matter. When I said that the censored was Cain, the battle had begun. In the UK, one of our members messaged me about a burning sensation around his throat, and he was coughing up blood. CAI, depiction of UK member coughing up blood from unknown cause. Another member claimed that a huge gust of wind burst through his front door, followed by shadows and a deep, cold dread sensation. Texas, a woman claimed she saw 3 beings sizing her up. The skin around her throat seemed to compress as if an invisible hand was choking her. West Virginia, another woman had a redness and shortness of breath around her throat. Idaho, I started to feel a tingle up and down my spine, my system overloading. It honestly felt like I had a seizure. I had to disconnect to recalibrate myself. On the other screen I had up, I watched as more people dropped, leaving the 3 overwhelmed. As one of the guys, Censored, who remained, started to suggest ending the stream, recapping the events, another gentleman, Censored, started to act strange. Censored leaned towards his webcam, as if trying to stare through the screen, immediately putting the fear into Censored. If one had to describe the vibe coming from Censored, it would be best described as, "I won, what will you do now?" For a brief moment I noticed something. As Censored went to mention my name, Censored would flinch as if the very mention of me triggered a PTSD-esque response. Censored said my name again, and the same thing occurred. I may have had a way to end this. My issue was that Censored had several small children in the house and was on and off chemo. This could have gone south very quickly, but inaction was the only thing which guaranteed a worse outcome. I left a message to "Let me in, I can end this" in the live stream chat as only 2 remained on the screen. Censored had left, leaving Censored with our Censored at the time. Censored was trying to get Censored to speak, but his words fell on deaf ears. My web connection held and I was able to step in. Censored quickly showed fear but tried to hide it. "I know who you are, I know what you want. Let him go." Slowly shook his head no. Now, my voice reverberated. The being that took influence of mighty Censored broke the connection, but far from willingly. It took a few minutes for Censored to gather himself and the live stream continued on. Before the playtime began, I asked Censored what he saw while he was under, to which all he said was, "You already know." End of February 2021. As progress was being made in helping heal those affected, the worst by Cain's assault on Censored, there was a visitation from a rather unusual party, potentially Lucifer himself. Lucifer seemed worried about one of the members most heavily affected by the assault, as well as the absence of the accompanying entity tied to this individual, who identified herself as Lilith. Lucifer was pleading for a favor, appealing to the side of me that had started to catch romantic feelings for Censored to justify my taking part in what would amount to a rescue mission. Lilith had gone missing. Censored was not even able to sense her. There was a deliberate cutoff. Lucifer had a rough idea where she had gone off to, but there was something blocking him from getting close to Lilith. That's where he needed my help. I could sense that this being, whether it was the Lucifer or not, was genuine in his pleas. In fact, I got the sense he was worried I may harm him. It was on that pretense I agreed. The next thing I knew, Lucifer placed his hand upon my forehead, and we were transported somewhere dark. I seemed to glow, the light of my being illuminating my surroundings. There were whispers, the drops of water echoing through elaborate cave systems. It seemed like we had somehow gone underground, but the state I was in made the space feel much more vast than I anticipated. I followed Lucifer down some steps, seeing vines gripping the walls, until we reach a large opening that Lucifer seemed warded from. He couldn't pass through, no matter his efforts, but I was unhindered by the barrier. I traversed further, finding an opening illuminated by a large flame. A river passed through, more vine-like plants growing into the surroundings, all leading to a large flat stone where a woman laid upon her side. It was Lilith, beaten and rattled by Cain. It took some convincing. The fact that Censored saw me as a friend and the possession revealed Cain was afraid of me. It didn't take much for me to get through to Lilith. She apologized. The situation was just too much, assuring me she would return to Censored in a couple days. That's when the vision Lucifer induced stopped. The following morning, I received a text from Censored confirming Lilith had in fact come back. According to Censored, Lucifer confirmed he had solicited my help. Where did he take me, though? Hell? Hades? Inner Earth? With all that has come forward, I am re-evaluating nearly everything. February, March 2021. The following is a summary report of the events during and after the Censored attacks. Entity: Censored, aka Shadow Man, Lord of Shadows, Death. Location: Global classification. Dangerous intelligent entity, likely Nephilim, potentially godlike. Warning: this entity has shown the potential to cause significant harm or even death. Those who feel they may not be in the best state of mind should probably avoid reading this text in detail, as it may make you a susceptible target. The Hat Man is highly intelligent, most likely older than nearly every religious practice known to man, and has proven itself to be capable of almost every alleged form of spiritual attack. Personal information involving various individuals will be mentioned in this report for simple documentation and reference purposes only. This information has been shared by the individuals in question and is not by any means meant to discriminate against any of them. For the safety of civilians outside of the company and who haven't established a public appearance, names have been altered. Summary: first identified by author, Censored, is an entity that visits countless people seemingly around times of personal trauma. Most eyewitnesses report he appears in times of poor mental health, domestic violence, and drug use. Often he is stated to appear in the dead of night in his intended target's bedroom and just watches. He has also been known to show up at locations of significant tragedy that may respond to the circumstances mentioned above. It seems most common that individuals report visitations from this entity right around puberty. Censored has set up a point of contact on her official website to send in encounters with the entity or request her aid. She has also published 2 books regarding the entity, shadow people in general, and how to deal with them. Her publication company and herself have also trademarked the terms censored, allegedly as an effort to throttle misinformation to prevent further injury to potential victims. Personal encounter. I know not how long this entity has had its eye on me. The earliest I can account for something similar to its presence was roughly at the age of 3. This was after my life was almost taken by my stepmother, but I could fight back. At the age of 14, I had learned my father was being charged for sexually assaulting one of my sisters, and it prompted another visit from this thing. Only this time it spoke, offering me a deal to join him in return for the death of my father. As for what, I don't know. Other voices that came through pierced my own as I yelled for it to get away, and it seemed to deter it. Other times when it appeared, circumstances were surrounding further domestic violence, suicidal tendencies, violent and psychotic episodes, etc. For location reference, The incident involving the knife and my stepmother took place in November 1999. In 2001, I somehow transported 30 miles away from home. Thankfully, the location I turned up was my grandparents' house, likely in response to possible trauma. Psychic teleportation or alien abduction has been suggested. When I learned of the charges against my father and the subsequent deal, it was June of 2012. Preliminary research. Outside of the book by Censored, not much information was present to fully understand this entity or its motivations outside of the uneasy feelings numerous witnesses claimed to receive. As this was a continuing pattern, the official investigation, as Specialist of the Strange and other previous titles, was put on hold until further notice. The standard procedure was, and in many ways, guiding the clients into overcoming the traumas that may have triggered the Hat Man's appearances. Eventually, he will lose power and interest. With this veil of mystery, it seemed the entity was relatively harmless, just a figure that took joy in misfortunes enough to where he may influence it to come. Even mentions of this entity and possibly connected phenomenon are said to be lures for further troubles. A change. For years I shelved the investigation into this entity as nothing new seemed to come forward. However, in a casual conversation with my ex, Censored, I was told of her encounter with the Censored. Interestingly enough, it showed a deviation in behavior. When visiting a former boyfriend in the summer of 2015, she reported that something slammed a bathroom door on her and held it shut. This was right as a shadow apparition matching the description of the Censored pulled out a knife and charged at her former significant other. Needless to say, the relationship didn't last much longer afterward. Censored managed to fit all the criteria mentioned above for censored victimology, for lack of a better term. She had apparent signs of childhood sexual assault and obvious strained relationships with her parents. Severely abused as a child to the point large chunks of memory were missing. As is unfortunately common for most young ladies of that mindset, she frequented abusive relationships that may or may not have subconsciously reminded her of those times. She never worked up the courage to share the fullest extent of what has transpired with me, aside from feeling triggered at the sight of kill room scenes from the Showtime series Dexter. The telling of this encounter stirred further interest in the phenomenon because any different deviations would provide better insight. Comparisons between censored other eyewitness accounts hint at very little change in modus operandi. However, another pattern tied directly to episodes of sleep paralysis draws even more curiosity. This entailed a tall, slim shadow standing above a witness either just before falling asleep or being jarred out of a deep sleep yet not fully conscious. It needs to be noted these visions do qualify as hypnagogia or hypnopompic, depending on whether the subject is falling asleep or is just waking up, respectively. For those unfamiliar with the terms hypnagogia or hypnopompic, these describe a hallucinogenic state of mind. These cause visuals from a dreamlike state to still project visuals from a dream onto the waking world for the layman. Those familiar with augmented reality may be more familiar with the concepts. As such, states are often triggered by stress. The potential of this entity also making an appearance around the same time is not out of the question, if not a complete hallucination of an overloaded brain. Outbreak, the insanity of the COVID-19 pandemic, and 2020 as a whole finally turned the tides of the investigation. I left a post on Reddit asking for stories relating to the censored themes. A response from an anonymous user pointed me in the direction of Breton mythology to view versions of what most would be familiar as the Grim Reaper, or otherwise a servant of death itself. This version is known as the Anku. As with most versions of mythologies across the globe, there are regional variations. The Anku is sometimes described as a man or skeleton with a black robe and a large hat to conceal his face. Sometimes he may even just appear as a shadow apparition as well. One story that tries to explain the origins of the Anku states that it is the last person, usually male, to die in the previous year. Another report says that there may be multiple Anku at once, each one that stays within a specific region. Perhaps the most interesting of the tales is that the Anku is none other than the firstborn son of Adam and Eve. Cain, aka the father of murder. In the light of this information, more research needed to be done on the events within the Garden of Eden that led to Cain becoming murderous. It was essential to not focus on a single religious text. Instead, analyze all accounts to get some idea of how the Hat Man may be connected if there was any potential to be a remnant from humanity's beginnings. Looking within Jewish lore, a piece of information about the serpent in the Garden of Eden was of interest. Most would think of the serpent in the garden as none other than Lucifer. However, this is not the case, but quite possibly a case of mistaken identity. Lucifer is listed as a fallen angel. Yes, no matter what religious text one should read, he is not the figure one may think of today in association with Satan. Look through Hebrew translations of various texts, one would find that Satan was in fact used as a verb to denote an opponent, adversary, etc. Only when prefixed with ha, as in ha-Satan, the word serves the purpose of a noun or title. Going to early translations of Judeo-Christian texts, only one entity was ever called that directly. That being was named Samael, an archangel who ruled over death itself and was speculated to be Cain's biological father. After 2 weeks, a phone call came in on my hotline, right as I was returning home from work, that concerned a family out of North Carolina. Immediately, the overall vibe of the call just sang something sinister was going on. Whatever the matters at play, my moral obligations forced me to look deeper into the situation. The client mentioned whatever was attached to him seemed to be shifting its focus onto his 3-year-old son. The conversation took roughly 3 hours to complete. Once enough time and effort were established to build trust with the client, he shared all the typical signs of demonic influences. Strange smells, deep scratches, things being thrown around, nearly all of the classic symptoms. When the client, the family's father, was home alone, a particular entity matching the censored description would apparently sit down and talk with him about topics the father liked. When something would speak ill about the entity, objects would seem to be thrown towards people to warn them not to speak. There was also a particular room in the house, the wife called the dead room, where it seemed just walking into it would cause one to become physically ill. As our chats continued, he admitted that there was one incident where this entity grabbed him by the neck in the middle of the street and slammed him into a nearby car. On the other end of the call, I could hear the gentleman walking through his house. As he walked to let the family dog outside, a secondary voice emerged, one that sounded like a small child. The family consisted of a husband, wife, and one 3-year-old child. The wife and child were already relocated to a town in Idaho. Upon asking the husband about the voice, he asked if it sounded like a 5 to 7-year-old. Apparently, the wife had suffered a miscarriage in that time frame. It isn't unusual for miscarried children to pay their would-be parents a visit. The fact that the alleged child shouted the words, "If you don't hang up that phone now, you little bitch, I'll fucking kill you," was enough of a red flag to warrant further study. I asked the husband if at any time during these conversations did the entity identify itself. Obviously, the entity was trying to establish trust, so if you're going to be friends with someone, you obviously need to know each other's names. The name given was Cain, and Cain was trying to recruit the husband with promises to be a general in his army, as the husband put it. I provided the family with a protection sigil I designed with the aid of the Archangel Michael. It was initially crafted in response to a case out of Pittsburgh to help a family stalked by a corrupted soul of a child rapist and murderer. This case drew in UFO activity throughout its duration and even caught the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren. When writing this report, it is unknown if these facts are relevant outside of illustrating the magnitude of the case. The negative spirit was a man who likely raped and murdered 2 young girls known of. With the sigil administered, the activity was brought to an end for both these cases. As for the family from North Carolina, it should also be noted that the father admitted to me to experiment with the recreational use of DMT at a young age. DMT is a chemical that is believed by some to be connected to the spiritual phenomenon. The son had shown early sensitivity to paranormal elements, which may have been influenced by his father's DMT use, which occurred long before the child was born. Still, it is likely he will grow out of it in time. A few days after the encounter with the family in North Carolina, a figure appeared in my bedroom that offered to reveal information helpful to the case. Its appearance was short, roughly 5 feet in height. Hiding within the veil of shadow it cast, I swore I could see the curves of a woman. The figure's eyes seemed to appear first from the cover, with a gentle and welcoming smile. I could make out more details of her appearance as she revealed herself. She looked of Middle Eastern descent, with sparkling brown eyes, olive-toned skin, and curly black hair. I asked her for her name, which her reply was, "I've had many names, but you know me as Eve." Eve approached me, placed her hand on my temple, and started to show me visions of what I could only assume was the Garden of Eden. I had a sense of familiarity, as if I was there before. Eve proceeded to walk me through her affair with Samael. She showed how Adam mistreated her and Cain because of the ordeal, with Cain holding deep resentment and anger that grew with the abuse. Finally, she showed him snapping. Abel was the typical annoying younger brother Adam favored, and seemed to boast about being the favorite child. This was the moment that Cain was driven to murder his brother, leading to the famous curse. By Eve's hand, I was able to see the act take place. Abel managed to successfully land one good blow by slamming a rock into Cain's face. Upon realizing what was happened, Abel tried to beg for mercy, which only angered Cain more. This is likely the true origin of the mark of Cain. Sightings of one Hatman figure's true face mention possible scar tissue on the right side of the face. A month later, a woman reaches out to me in regards to postings online. I made inquiring stories about the Hatman and asked if I knew anything. Upon hearing that I had done an episode of my podcast dedicated to my findings until that point, she was adamant about listening to it before talking to me. She soon got back to me frightened, explaining that she was being visited by this thing around the time her 5-month-old son was born. She grew scared when the entity seemed to focus on the baby. However, she was even more nervous at the news of the Hatman's real identity being Cain, as that was the name she gave to her child. She was administered the sigil to help ward off the child and has had no more encounters with the entity. Enter the company. I utilized my social media management service to frequently post a notice across my various pages. This was to start pulling together more stories to plot a potential documentary to further explore the phenomenon beyond the "he's just evil" narrative that is currently present. In collecting more stories, Censored initiated a global effort to gather more information on the entity. During the beginning stages of this, an attempt was made to speak to Censored directly. Unfortunately, her trademarking the term made any discussions beyond that non-existent. Her reasoning behind the move was to utilize legal methods to curb the spread of misinformation that could lead to further harm or death. However, her manner in speaking does hint that she is more about capitalizing on her discovery. As this was the case, the investigation moved forward. Priority 1 was to establish a timeline of where and when this thing appeared, and gather full testimonies from eyewitnesses. I had my doubts about this approach. It seemed heavily rooted in episodes involving severe trauma that often gets obscured as the mind attempts to protect itself. Still, it was the best thing to go on. Many started to simply copy and paste reports from posts on the social media page Reddit, some of which were taken from responses to my posts. This approach may seem simple enough to the novice, but obviously proved, partially, the main flaw I was concerned about. Thanks to a sequence of attacks on February 12th and 13th during live streams on the Censored YouTube channel, these matters were soon forgotten. As if conveniently planned, most of the damage took place on the 13th, as the entity took out members on panel one by one, seemingly traveling thousands of miles in a matter of minutes. This led to one member, Censored, becoming possessed and promptly exorcised on air, and the official termination of the investigation. In the weeks that followed, the team faced unusual amounts of mental trauma from within the company. One such member even has to take mental health leave due to personal circumstances, Censored. Analysis of audio collected by myself during these attacks returned the messages, "Quit hunting us," "Tear him apart," and the names of 2 members explicitly named as targets. These members were censored. Likely, multiple entities came through on those recordings, even ones who tried to help the team. One other member, censored, who was in the focus of the attack, claimed she was left with babysitters designated by the censored. Due to hostile behaviors from censored, it is unknown whether or not these reports are accurate. Unfortunately, the safest assumption in that regard would be to assume they were in fact false. Efforts are best allocated to help further assist other victims. One last portion that should be noted is another member who was not on the panel. Censored was also attacked upon trying to perform Reiki protections. In comparison, the attack was minor, with symptoms akin to a light sunburn. She was quickly advised to walk away to protect herself and her young children. In the dark, I had a gut feeling that Hat Man was not going to simply leave us be. This is something that could simply step to the left and view his victim's entire world, down to every movement of their internal organs and every little thought in their mind. Have it step right, and it's thousands of miles away. I took on the investigation further, gathering more reports of encounters. More concerning patterns arose. One involved a young man who swore vengeance against the entity for the deaths of his father and best friend. Another involved a mother concerned for her 3-year-old daughter, who frequently would shout, "Go away, Shadow Man!" This would be just before she claimed something pushed her down the stairs. Another was a woman reported she had dealt with intense visitations from shadow people before. Minimal contact was kept with censored to respect their need to heal. Still reeling from the experience, likely due to reminders of past trauma, censored had all records of the entity wiped from censored systems to prevent encouraging unprepared individuals from instigating another attack. I know not if this was coincidence or if by some psychic link, but after a couple weeks had passed, work was done to start severing the dark energies surrounding both censored. Occult energies were worked in response to sever the connections, first starting with censored, as she claimed that the censored left behind other censored to watch her and the team. I attempted to make a deal with the censored, which offered him a chance to spread his terror without having to lift a finger, in exchange for pulling away from censored. This was to buy time, then orchestrate a clever counter-assault against the censored to render him powerless outside of potential duties as a version of the Grim Reaper. Within hours, censored reached out to report the entities were gone. Apparently there was a conversation that took place between the entities that involved mention of the Knowing One. After censored was made aware of the deal, she figured they were talking about me. I pondered an idea presented by censored to use occult practice to create some form of censored to combat any further attacks. Another sigil was designed to help create the being, later to be dubbed the Night of Light. The name was picked through poetic contrast to further the intent of it being a protective entity, binding energies from the Archangel Michael to counter potential influence from the only being known as Satan. Within a couple weeks of circulating this image, the woman whose child was being stalked by a censored came forward, and Night of Light sigil mentioned that her 4-year-old daughter claimed she was saved by the night light. The curious bit was that during a video call, the little girl happened to see me on the other end and grew excited, screaming, "Mama, he's the night." No other incidents have been reported. Within the same week, censored started to slowly recover from his treatments enough to make appearances more with the company. It has been noted on a few occasions that a shadow figure could be seen behind censored, watching him. This is speculated to be the same watcher that censored had experienced at her own place. Months later, while backstage for after-show hangout after a taping of censored, furthered that he had wanted to bring up the topic of angels for some odd reason, and having been a fan of my previous works through the paranormal streaming network, censored, the discussion shifted into my first encounter with the little girl known as Olivia. Upon hearing this discussion, censored came forward about having dreams involving a strange little girl he never met before. When he gave a rough description of what the little girl looked like, It triggered enough of a familiarity with me to investigate further. How would I do this? Well, conveniently, I do have an uncle on my mother's side, censored, who physically looks like he could be my twin brother. Growing up, we were confused as one another all the time. Censored has 3 kids, a boy and twin fraternal girls, who not only look like they could be my own, but all had phases where they would call me Dad. I pulled out a baby picture of one of the twin girls, and Censored was hysterical. The baby picture was nearly identical to the girl he saw, but he claimed his dream visitor was a few years older. I dug around for a picture that had myself and both of the girls, who were about age 3 at the time, and Censored freaked out even more. The only other person who believed she had seen Olivia was Censored. The previously held idea that my potential daughter was only visible to blood family was thrown out when Censored came forward. The reason it wasn't with Censored was because she and I found out we had similar genetic heritages, so the possibility we were somehow distantly related was pondered, but not yet proven. Censored would also provide even more insight. When the investigation into the Hat Man begun, Censored was the only member to come forward about having previous experience with the entity, which involved physical attacks that occurred with Thing. She was about 14 years old. She also recalled nightmares where she was sitting in total darkness and would see the Hat Man's true face just staring at her from above. Other nightmares she believed were connected to the entity all shared a same general theme of being all alone in a time of crisis, possibly reflecting inner fears of not being good enough for healthy relationships. After the attack, she had to take a leave of absence from Censored in order to cope with mental health-related issues. Out of respect, I choose not to go too far into detail about what issues those were, as they are not relevant to the situation at hand, and to respect her privacy. Interestingly enough, I had a dream one night that mirrored the recurring nightmares Censored had shared with me, the ones where she would be alone in the dark, with the Hat Man staring at her from above. Only this time, I was able to intercept the dream and approach the being from behind to attack it. The very next day, Censored started communicating more with members of the team. When I got to talk to her, Censored, and I discovered that not only were we close in age, her being born in December 1995 and myself in January 1996, but we had very similar profiles in astrology, psychic ability, and genetic heritage. We both even had attachments with strong entities, often viewed as polar opposites. Further research through https:/maps.leylines.ch/ helped discover that she and I would roughly the same distance from a minor ley line. These connections were speculated to render it possible for Censored and I to send messages to one another via the Necrophonic app, and for Olivia to make appearances between the two of us. It was through Censored I was able to get enough information to render an image of Olivia through apps similar used to age progress missing children photos. While recording episodes of their podcast, they managed to capture the voice of a little girl saying "ding dong" like she was trying to get their attention, as well as what sounded like a tired mommy. The second EVP captured ignited speculation that Censored may have been her real mother, but it would soon turn out that theory didn't hold much water as information came forward that proposed the possibility Olivia was not traveling alone. Censored DAS's image was also used to render the picture of Olivia, to which Censored would later confirm to be an exact match. Two possibilities come out from this information. The first being that Olivia was not alone, but was being guided by Mommy. Reports from individuals claiming to have sensitivities to paranormal energies came forward, stating that Olivia seemed to be holding someone's hand, but the witness could not see a figure. The second possibility, which may still hold some merit, is that Censored had some physical resemblance to Olivia's real mother, and Olivia herself may have vision problems. A connection between Censored and myself would be further tested when Censored an emergency message starting with, "Call Dakota, I think I just saw Olivia." Censored had mentioned that a little girl with blonde hair had been spotted around his place since before meeting me. So it is a possibility that Olivia has been watching over certain people for quite some time on top of visiting me. The emergency message contained an SOS that detailed Censored had seen Olivia moments before being attacked and potentially possessed by a shadow entity. When the possibility of possession was presented, Censored and I began working on a remote exorcism to sever the connection from Censored. I had a necrophonic running, which helped monitor the situation. Olivia signaled when the connection to Censored was severed, and he would soon call Censored and I. This is when we learned that Censored was physically being compelled to avoid the phone at all costs, feeling the sensation that something was growing increasingly angry when he would think of calling me for help. The rendered image of Olivia was later shown to Censored, to which he confirmed with the distinction he didn't get a clear look at her face. Daddy's girl. From outer space? To the best of my knowledge, Olivia first appeared in my life at the age of 12. Though with recent events, she may have been around longer, though the possibility of time travel remaining leaves establishing a timeline nearly impossible. Olivia would appear at random whenever my mind would slip into a darker place, in order to offer words of encouragement. 3 other incidents took place where Olivia would appear in order to warn me of a coming death, either to offer support or to warn me of coming danger. Rendering of Olivia Hope, based on a total of 13 witnesses. The second encounter came the day I lost my maternal grandfather, my mother's father, to cancer. She appeared and offered to let me use her sight to see my grandfather's dying moments via astral travel. I would have been in the room personally, but as the oldest sibling, I was tasked with keeping the younger ones and dogs locked in a separate room to avoid them getting in the way of emergency personnel. Little did she and I both realize, my grandfather was in a condition that allowed him to see her in the room. The third took place in October of 2014. I was in a car accident, struck by a pickup truck going 60 miles per hour. The impact was hard enough for me to go unconscious. However, I believe without a doubt that Olivia appeared in the car just moments before impact, screaming, "Daddy, look out!" The third took place in April of 2016 while I was in Paris, France. My tour group was on a riverboat cruise to admire the light show of the Eiffel Tower when suddenly it started to rain. The group and others on the boat hid in the deck below to hide from the elements while I stayed topside. A tap on my shoulder initially gave me the impression that I was standing in the way of someone's photo. When I looked back to see who it was, I was shocked to see it was my grandfather standing side by side with Olivia. The two of them mentioned that they weren't going to be visiting as much as they were, as I no longer needed their guidance as much. I can validate from EVP recordings of various cases my grandfather still checks in from time to time to see where my ventures take me. This report would likely not be as long had Olivia stopped appearing. In time, I came to realize that they both were just trying to help keep me going. As for why Olivia has become more active, that is still up to speculation. After joining Censored, I created 2 films for the streaming network, Censored, one titled The Hunt for Olivia, to explore more about what I knew involving the Olivia paradox, as I called it. The other was Bonds of Beyond, designed to explore overlap between the ET-UFO phenomenon and spirit phenomenon. It should also be mentioned that there was an earlier experiment titled The Hunt for Infinite Earths that inspired Bonds of Beyond further. All these projects brought out a number of names of entities that may be showing interest. These entities are as follow: Michael the Archangel, Gabriel the Archangel, Metatron, Yeshua. Actual name of Jesus translates directly into the name Joshua Yahweh, El, Ashtar, Vrilin, Athena, Censored, referred to as simply John. In Bonds of Beyond, Censored was based on real occult information. Several people involved in Censored creation claim they saw and interacted him within our world. After a spirit box session was conducted, an audio message was left for Dakota with an unexplained source of white noise that said, "If you can hear me, Censored wants you." Aleister Crowley's spirit box communications were held to reach out to Crowley to see if he knew anything about the Censored, has offered help in the fight. By interacting with Censored, 2 more entities entered into focus. Lucifer Lilith, Censored, offered tips into more entities worth studying, believed to be connected to the Pleiadians. Artemis Diana, Apollo UFO contact experiments were also conducted focusing on the members of the Ashtar Command, producing interesting video footage of strange objects appearing. When directing attention towards Ashtar's crew, Olivia would appear. It should also be mentioned that seemingly out of random, I had a dream where I was taken to a futuristic hospital room where a woman laid in bed while holding a baby boy. Olivia was sitting next to the woman, and upon realizing I was there, she looked at me and said, "Daddy, come meet my baby brother." When I woke up, the word tachyonis came out of my mouth. A quick Google search revealed a theoretical particle speculated to be involved in time travel that was claimed by various New Age groups to be the source of the Pleiadians' space travel capability. The next day, Censored, psychic medium, mentioned to me that she needed to one day talk about my experience. Censored, who goes by the name Censored, also gave me a mini reading through a Zoom call where Olivia's voice came through the speaker. All these interactions help render even more images of Olivia's potential mother and a grown version of her baby brother. Information of individuals omitted from public record for privacy. Project Nightshade. With the added influence of extraterrestrials, it seems that Censored may be on the verge of something that will change the world, hopefully for the better. I know not if it is entirely true that my own matters are a catalyst for this series of events to evolve, but as anyone can see, it would be dumb of me not to include it. I truly feel that we are being left a trail of breadcrumbs that will lead us to the ultimate truth about reality. It is also said that the biggest rule of working with the Ashtar Command or Galactic Federation is that if they offer to help us, we cannot hold that information for selfish gain. If we work together, we might just push the efforts of our organizations to new heights. This report does not signal the end of the investigation. I myself have spent the better part of 13 years trying to understand the situation with my daughter. However, it has been made crystal clear that this has been a part of me for much longer than that. My family heritage has 400 plus years of paranormal sensitives, psychics, witches, you name it, to the best of my knowledge, that is. In the year 2020, right as these events with Censored kicked up, my home state of Idaho had the highest number of reported UFO sightings in the U.S. I grew up in a haunted small town. The room I tried to take my own life in was the same room I ended up in after the possible alien abduction incident when I was 6. It was also the same room my grandfather passed away in and saw Olivia for the first time. I remember visions of the Censored logo. There's too much here for it to all be coincidence. Moving forward, I suggest furthering the study into the Ashtar Command, as well as establishing more of a profile on the Censored and possible ways to divert future attacks, just in case. Some of the patterns indicate that the to-be-dated Japan trip may have something more waiting for us in already dangerous territories. I plan on researching more into occult methods to provide safety to members of Censored and the public we release this information to. I believe the Japanese have an equivalent of voodoo dolls we may be able to use as a sort of stand-in should we get attacked. I highly suggest we keep certain personal details out for the protection and respect of everyone involved, regardless of current standings or previous indiscretions. In the event of releasing this information to the public, we need to drip-feed the masses to lure out any more potential leads that may be beneficial to the investigation. Due to aforementioned trademark restrictions, we will need to call the Censored by another name. I can suggest the name Lord of Shadows, as I refer to him in my book, Dear Coda, Time to Fess Up. Once we are ready, we can present our findings to the public. This can be an opportunity to further the company's focus into bettering mental health. Instead of portraying it like a horror documentary, my idea is something more like an Avengers formatted presentation. All forms of people, on and off world, coming together to combat a common enemy and better the world as we go. This will also provide ways to cross-market other Censored-related brands and give participating members a chance to promote their own works. If this is going to work, we need everyone. Active members of Censored listed in this document are to be given top priority in coming together. Opportunities for others to participate will be available as well.